Damn, YouTube cut me off. Anyways, where was I? Okay, I was talking about pharaohs. Hmm. So, back to about the pharaohs. The pharaohs is okay. Let me get back to the light bulb hieroglyphic decoded. Now, in the light bulb, let's just get a brief overview. The light bulb hieroglyphic, it's got two different light bulb hieroglyphics next to each other, forming a triangle. Two pharaohs, each facing each other, with scripts of writing in front of them, and they're both wearing their headgear to represent the gods, the Anunnaki, the Greys, whatever you want to call them, all the same thing. And they are basically the abductees who have been taught the information needed, and the Greys would abduct them and teach them as children the ways of what they want the people to know, and they would teach them about astrology, the stars. They teach them about things that they wouldn't normally know on a normal lifespan, and it would just be a they'd be considered just as intelligent as the gods when they came back. And because they were used in bloodline, they were used bloodline after bloodline, and that because they're used bloodline after bloodline, it was kept up as they were the gods. And it came to the point where the Anunnaki could leave and let us be on our own with the information that they've given us and see what happens, see how well we take off on our own without them holding our hand anymore. Because basically, what they were doing is when they abducted the people, when they abducted the royal bloodline that kept on for generations, they were ensuring that the same what's that called? I don't remember what it's called, but basically like where the belief where a person's soul and inner being stays with them for the next lifetime, the belief in many lives, the belief that you come back, that's what they believe. The Greys believe, the Anunnaki believe that we have afterlives, that we live again and again and again. And that is what they meant by heaven. That's what they meant by living in heaven. Because when they said heaven, they meant the sun, they meant space, they meant exploration. They didn't mean some magical place that doesn't exist. And when they said space and the stars and exploration, they meant in future lifetimes when you become more advanced, you'll be able to be out there. And if you do good in this lifetime, then in the next lifetime you'll do even better. And you'll do more intelligent things. And then you'll get to have a better life. And in turn, you'll be in heaven. And if you do bad things, then you'll be in hell. In the next lifetime, you're going to be a peasant. You're going to be somebody who lives on the streets. You're going to be an urchin. You're going to be. That's why they had such drastic social networks where people were super rich and people were super poor, because they wanted to keep it like that. They wanted to keep it so that way, like, people who did good kept their benefits throughout each lifetime, because they believed that you lived over and over and over. And they believed that by teaching the children new things each time in new bloodlines, that they were collectively teaching them, in a sense. And in a way, they kind of were, because when the pharaohs were being taught and then they were brought back, and they used what they were taught to teach the people, and that's why the kids, these little kids, were able to raise an entire civilization, because they were so freaking smart from special treatment. But in a way, what they were doing was being brought on from many civilizations afterwards. Not in the sense that I would actually believe that people would retain something generations afterwards, but more in the sense that when you're the way that you're ruling your people and the rules that you set in based on what they taught you will last until the next generation. And during the next generation, they're going to teach you something new. And that new thing that they teach you is going to interact with the old thing that you were teaching. It's going to interact with the previous thing that you're putting into effect as a world change. And so these abductees were just as intelligent as the gods. They're just as important. And so the gods weren't needed anymore. It could just become God, which is why we have the term God at all. If it wasn't for the pharaohs, we wouldn't even have the term God, because they were the deities. They were the sacred people. They were God. And now things have become so diluted and nothing even makes sense in religion anymore. Even the people, they're all crazy. But to continue on, the light bulb has a snake in it. I don't know if I've mentioned this already, but I might as well just start over thanks to YouTube. It has a snake in it that curves. And it starts out really curvy, like DNA. It represents one strand. There's two strands coming up to each other, and a big swerve at the beginning. They're being taken apart. They're taking apart these DNA strands, basically. That's why there's two test tubes. There's one over here shaped like an acute angle, and there's one over here at the same radius of an acute angle, forming a perfect triangle. And it's I forget the name for that kind of triangle. I think it's called isosceles. It's where you have like a 30, 30, and a 60 in the middle, something like that. Big number in the middle, small on the sides. And anyways, the snake is inside the test tube, and there's two separate test tubes going away from each other. And the snake starts out really curvy in each one, and it eventually gets straighter and straighter until it gets to the bud. Like a flower, the bud, the nectar, that snake is the nectar. It is what the bee takes from flower to flower to cross-pollinate. This DNA was being cross-pollinated. In ancient writings, all ancient writings, a plant, a tree, any sort of plant life was used to represent new life. If it was behind somebody, if it was around somebody, it meant new life for that person. In this situation, it is in front of the pharaoh. So it means new life for the pharaoh. It means new life. It means that the pharaoh is part reptilian, according to them. That somehow disappeared. Because we are not reptilian at all anymore. Well, at all. We're not reptilian. We're not cold-blooded. But by that script's writing, it is basically saying that the pharaohs were reptilian to some degree. And that bud goes back to the stem. And the stem is reaching around. That means the life that it is creating dilutes into society. It reaches around to the end that is holding up that test tube, that is holding up the very beginning of where those two strands of DNA first came apart. At the end of the one on the right, there is a machine with snake hands holding it up. Basically meaning it's the mechana, what the Bible calls, what is it called? It's not machina, that's Spanish. It's manna, which was a food that people could eat. And it was basically a machine that produced this food that fed the people. And in the same situation, there's a machine that is feeding this process of taking apart the DNA. Now let me check to make sure. Yep, YouTube's still recording me. Good. I hate it when it stops. And in the center, just behind the snake's head that's holding up the heaviest part of the test tube, is a woman praying who just so happens to be wearing the queen's special garments. It is the queen praying. It is the queen who not only listens to the snake, but also listens to the pharaoh. She is on the same outside as the snake, but the pharaoh is behind everything. Behind everything. Look at my wordplay. Pay attention to words I'm using. It's behind everything. He's the one who makes it all happen. She may be listening to the snake. She may be also being abducted. But he's the one who calls the shots. And on the one on the left, at the very end of the stem, it curves up onto a platform. Into a platform, actually, where a reptilian creature is standing, holding up the test tube without its head touching it at all, with the sun in the background shining where separation between its head and the test tube, meaning that it is the equivalent of a machine that is feeding the test tube. Its DNA, it's holding the DNA that's going into the test tube. It is the light. It is the sun. It is powerful. It does not need to use its head like the woman who is holding it up with their holding up the midsection with their head, who is holding up half of the information with their head. It is holding up the heaviest part, the most important details, without using its head at all. Because on its head is sun, its energy, its spirit that is touching the test tube. It's its spirit that's making it all possible. It's their spirit that lives on through us, which is what they expect to become whatever it is their plan is. Whatever their plan is, they expect us to live up to it. Us. A part of them. But not necessarily the same thing. If you put something in a test tube, it doesn't make it new. Entirely new. They were abductees. The test tube was something taken apart, but it was still its own thing. So, basically, I decode this as something completely different from what people thought. Electricity? No. It was the same as a crop circle. A crop circle nowadays is something that they still communicate with us. It's written down overnight. The pharaohs probably had the people make the temples. And now, either the people carved those in, or just like our crop circles that give us information, secretive information that is meant to be help history, to help us understand our past so we don't make mistakes in the future. Today's crop circles that mysteriously show up at the work of Greys possibly is not the first time that something like that has happened. Maybe the hieroglyphics showed up overnight, and because the gods spoke the same language as the people, they both wrote in hieroglyphics, they both used symbols. Maybe the pharaoh, who's the only one allowed in the pyramid anyways, was the only one who was able to read it, because he was taught the difference between, let me just give an example, Spanish and English. He was taught the difference between what the commoners know as hieroglyphics